Today I'd like to make a quick clarification on a certain assumed discrepancy between two concepts from pagan philosophy. That is the notion of fate and the will. So the reason why most people would think this would be a contradiction is that fate as predetermination, it already decides how your life will be lived, and the will is the opposite of that. It's living to your own, your own will is way of creating your own life and living a certain way which is not fated. But I'm going to explain that this is wrong, because if you take, for example, take the two concepts individually. Fate is born from the notion that of recurrence. It's the idea that because everything you do will be done throughout eternity, will be echoed into eternity, will send ripples through time, and for that reason, it's already been determined from your previous existence and so on. And the reason why, but the thing is, fate is divided into two sort of subcategories when it comes to objects in existence. You see, as I explained it in my video on the scientific proofs for the eternal recurrence, I touched on how there's really just two different cycles for time, and our time itself is a circle, and within this there exists a macrocosm and a microcosm, and what is eternal in the microcosmic plane is what is echoed in the macrocosmic plane. So there is that which is fateful, that which shares the essence of fate, and is singularitized with the macrocosm, with the happenings and the tidings in the macrocosm. And then there is that which is fated, so that which is in essence fateless, but at the same time is acted on by this by these forces in the macrocosm. And so if you take, for example, an animal, like say a deer or a hedgehog or an ox or whatever, this animal is essentially fateless, but because its place in the microcosm is dependent on these macrocosmic turnings and tidings. There's a certain level of determination. It has fate, but with human beings, we share the essence of fate. So if you look at it in Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is the ash tree, which connects all of the worlds together. It connects the microcosm to the macrocosm physically. It transcends them. It singularitizes them. And human beings, or Asgard and Embla, were the first human beings, were made from this material, from the ash tree. And so, man was shared the essence of fate, of this destiny. And in this sense, we are above those sort of other beings and other objects in existence, in that we are singularitized, but with the macrocosm. And in this sense, we are not just acted on by destiny, but rather we are able to forge our own destiny, and we are able to act upon the world itself, and upon say animals and life forms and other concepts. Because we are able to put fate into these concepts, we are part of the macrocosm as well as the microcosm in that sense. Now, will is not so much forging fate as such, because obviously you can only work within what is possible, what is being ordained by the macrocosmic forces. But the will is more like a way of actualizing your fate, actualizing your destiny. It's a way of becoming. And so rather than forging fate, it's more like hammering your fate into eternity. It's a way of creating an image of yourself or form of yourself, becoming who you are essentially, and perpetualizing it, making it eternal and infinite. Now, if you were to take, say, for example, an animal, to go back to that image, an animal which is essentially fateless, but which itself also has the will. This is because these animals are not able to act as a creator or as a godhead on the physical realm, but they are still able to forge their own paths into eternity, and that's essentially what reproduction and the life cycle is, if you think about it. This is very obvious when you look at how exactly it works on a microcosmic level, because in order to engage in this cycle of perpetuation, you need to do certain things which themselves you can imagine would be reflected on a wider scale throughout time and space. The act of reproduction, of obtenance of nutrients, of health and hygiene and rest, and to get more specialized concepts like knowledge and wisdom. As well, these are all vestiges of the will. And Nietzsche explains this in his Will to Power, when he explains all the various manifestations of the will. And I'll make another video on that. But not to digress, that's what distinguishes, say for example, the fateless, in essence, organisms from the fateful, which is the human beings. And of course, another way of looking at that divide is by looking at our souls. Because unlike in animals, which of course have spirits like we do, we also have an additional a soul, additional mind, which the animals don't have. It's not to mean that we are in any way above the animals in the cosmic plane, and that we are somehow more important than them. But it is important to understanding how consequential our decisions are, and our actions on Earth, on the physical plane. Because we are, like I said, hammering our will into eternity, hammering our fate into eternity. In Irish, for example, just to give another folk reference, another mythological, or this is just a linguistic reference. In Irish, to say something is fated to you, you say "Tá siad de chrann orm." It is of a tree, the chrann of a tree, orm, to me, or on me. So it's this is referring again to the chrann of Yaha, which is again just the Irish version of Yggdrasil, which is again the tree of fate. So again, fate in this sense is related to the tree which connects, say, the physical to the metaphysical. That's just the symbol in paganism. So it's important to understand those symbols, symbols from those images from paganism and our mythology, because they're not just superstition. They always represent a philosophical doctrine, which is not written down exoterically and plainly in the same way as, say, for example, the Bible is written in a series of virtues and vices and laws, but rather it's written in a metaphorical way. And so this is just one more way to understanding a philosophical concept. And I do think there are many similarities many connections between this philosophy of Nietzsche and our pagan philosophy of our ancestors. And this is just one example. So, just to elucidate that further, to clear it up, it's a greater cycle which happens in the macrocosm, and this is reflected in the microcosm through fate acting on the people. And you see, this is another way of saying the gods interacting with life on Earth. When the gods intervene, in other words, so certain things must happen in order for the cycle the greater cycle, that is recurrence, to occur. And that's why whenever something which might threaten that recurrence occurs, it's intervened with by that macrocosm. In other words, it's predestined. It's acted on in order to make it occur differently. And that's really what fate is. Then of course there are the fateless beings, which are inanimate, I guess you could call them, in terms of fate. They don't have a destiny. And then there are those which are human beings which share again the macrocosmic fatefulness, and then the will is just a separate thing. It's the defining characteristic of life. All life forms have a will, including plants and the bacteria. And this is a very obvious scientific principle. In fact, I'll make another video on that. I'll talk about how Darwin is wrong, and how his or at least how Darwinian thinking is very incorrect in many ways. And I'll just redefine the will there in that video. But I hope this clears things up, because it is something which a lot of people seem to misunderstand, and it makes them think that there's some sort of contradiction here in paganism, but really there isn't.